Hi everybody, Mr. Rachel. We're talking about the parent square root function in this video.
You know who you are.
Who is she?
I'm Groot. Yeah, you said that.
And so when you take a look at that equation, the parent square root equations is like this. Y equals that little check mark thing. We call that a radical. So y equals radical x is what we say, or f of x equals the square root of x. That little check mark is called the radical symbol. That's what tells you it's a square root. Now we're going to take a look at the graph of the parent square root function. And what you're going to notice is it doesn't use all the parts of the graph. In fact, it starts at the origin on the parent square root function, and then it goes on top of the x-axis, but it doesn't go underneath. This is for the parent function, which means we have very specific restrictions on the domain and range that we'll talk about next. So as we talk about the domain and the range of the square root function, you need to remember that you cannot be on the left side of the graph on the parent square root function. Those negative x's won't work. So what you need to remember, the domain and range have specific restrictions, and for the parent square root function, the domain has to be greater than or equal to 0, and the range has that same thing. It also has to be greater than or equal to 0. So as we remember important things about the square root function, let's remember that the graph of a square root function, I call it an angel's wing, right? It kind of looks like the wing of an angel. But the big thing you need to remember is the domain and range. The domain has to be greater than or equal to 0. That's the right half of the graph on the right side of the origin. The range has to be taller. And then the other thing you need to remember, the square root is that little check mark symbol that we call a radical. So whenever you see f of x equals that radical x, that tells you it is a square root. So be mindful of that as you look at all three parts. Guys, thank you for tuning in.